It's very detailed. I know that in 2009, we had a number of meetings, public hearings, public discussion about the master fee schedule and how it was put together. And so I am wanting to continue this item to our like August study session so that we can have more time to really digest and understand how you arrived at the numbers that you arrived at. So I just that's my personal opinion. I'd like to still hear your presentation, if you will, but I don't know what other council members feel about that.
Well, to hear what he has to say, I did take the time to go through it, and I do have some specific questions about the fees, that, you know, get a feeling not only from yourself. There are some fundamental questions I have, and there are some questions as to why we're doing one way, or because it's staff recommendation. I assume we had some input into it, so I would like to ask some questions on that. But but there's minimal questions, right?
Okay. Any other councilor?
Yeah, I can concur with your suggestion to revisit this in a workshop environment, and I will make some overall comments here later on.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'm saying the same thing. There's a lot of information here to absorb, and although I would like to see the presentation, and I'm sure Bill's comments and others, but that would also make a good information for a workshop as well. So.
Okay.
Well, we should also hear from the public that came to speak.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So
Carry
you're
on.
up. Carry on.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, thank you very much. First of all, appreciate the opportunity to provide your service to a really lovely community and work with your very fine staff, as you've noted. Given your comments, I will provide more of an overview of this and not waste a lot of your time now getting into the details. But the project really had three component pieces to it. One was what we call a full cost, indirect cost allocation plan. Another piece was to calculate the fully loaded productive hourly rates for each staff position, as well as contract staff positions, and then to calculate the full cost of each user fee, subset of that to do a comparison study. So I think what I will do is really skim over the indirect cost allocation plan. Just mention briefly that the methodology of doing one of these is really set by the Federal Office of Management and Budget, what was called the Federal Office of Management and Budget. Your city your town wouldn't have to use this methodology, but it's pretty standard. And basically it's a consumption model where we're looking at specific items of consumption. So for example, and I'll just flip to this screen here. For HR, for example, we're looking at assigning the cost of HR based on the FTE counts per department, making the assumption that every FTE pulls a certain level of effort and energy out of the HR function. Productive hourly rates. For this project, these were had a little bit of complexity, primarily because of the contract staff. This is a fairly standard formula for using town staff. We're looking at all of their total salary benefits. We're allocating non-personnel costs. We're allocating any and all overhead costs, as well as the town overhead costs that would be coming from the indirect cost allocation plan. We're also calculating productive hours available. So we start out with the 2080, subtract out vacation time, sick leave, paid all any time, daily work breaks, training time, etc., to come up with a number of productive hours. In this hypothetical model, we come up with a productive hourly rate of $112.38 an hour. Now for the contract staff, what we did was we started out with, in some cases, what they actually charged the town, or in other cases, what they would charge the town if they were to charge an hourly rate. And then we layered in on top of that on an allocated basis, something for non-personnel expenses, department overhead, town overhead, to come up with an hourly rate for contract staff. User fee study itself, we really focus on a methodology that is driven by what I call a driver-based costing model. So for every department, every function, we're looking at not just labor costs to allocate out on some kind of a prorated basis, but again, we're looking at things like department management and administration as an activity or as a function or as a process. And especially in the planning department and building, they spend a fair bit of time in doing things like customer service. There's a counter across the road, people walk in, there's service that needs to be provided, there's common questions. Question may or may not turn into a project, it's just basic customer service. And then there's what I call direct activities, application intake, an engineering model, a plan review, an inspection, maybe some project management, a council presentation. And then we're looking at how those costs can best be assigned to, in this case, 4 different individual user fees. It's a fairly robust model, and it's pretty detailed, requires a lot of data, requires a lot of interviews with staff. We also have a quality assurance model, a few ways we can make sure we're getting good data. We do focus on providing a quality process. For example, one of the things we don't do is walk in, hand staff a worksheet, say, fill it out in the morning, get back to me when you're done. We generated, probably in this case, easy 75 or 80% of the data, interviewing staff, working one-on-one. They were in a work group style session. Mike and Brett can attest to how much time we spent doing that. Spent a lot of time in conference calls. We spent a lot of time doing virtual meetings through the web-based medium. Staff reviews, obviously, as part of the quality review. We're looking at things like, if I project a certain level of revenue for the town, does that match approximately the town's actual revenue? Just, again, it's a check to make sure that we have quality data. Summary numbers, and we just looking at building, planning, engineering, and park facilities, you can see if the town were to choose the full cost recovery is in fact the best approach, you could expect to get an additional $356,000 from these fees by bringing everything up to full cost. Let me just spend a moment here on these 2 surcharge opportunities. I heard comments about additional funding sources. I've been doing these projects now for over, I guess, right at 10 years. I've done 65 or 70 or something. And I've seen many times when cities, counties have really antiquated, outdated technology for the permitting systems. And I ask the question, where's the revenue going to come from to upgrade those systems? What do you have to do? And typically, well, we have to go into the general fund, and we have to, budget for it, and we have to fight with the police chief to get those dollars sometimes. Actually working with a city on the other side of the bay right now, where they've had money allocated for technology upgrade for the permitting system for a couple of years, and it's never available to them. It goes to some other emergency situation. So one of the things I highly recommend to all my clients, it's a bit of a boilerplate, but set up some kind of a surcharge so that there is money available when those systems need to be updated and maintained. They do wear out, the functionality breaks down, technology improves. There's some phenomenal new technology enhancements that are available right now. I'm sure that Brett and Mike can speak more eloquently on those than I can. But one of the things we did was we estimated what would it take to bring the town fully up to a really state-of-the-art system. We spread that cost out over, I believe, a 5-year useful life. We did some basic analysis. Comes down to $44,000 a year, and that was then spread between planning, building, as well as in engineering. So we developed percentages for each one of those areas to recover that cost, so that you can in fact maintain your system, upgrade your system to what's available right now. Also, one of the other things I look for is how cities and towns and counties maintain the general plan. I've seen horror stories. I've seen way too many times when literally libraries have had been shut down for 2 or 3 days a week because they haven't maintained their general plan, and there's no money to do so. The state's going to come in and start planning the town. I've seen too many cases where the And literally, the city really has not even been able to maintain good documentation on its infrastructure, and people dig a hole in the ground for some reason, and they find out there's a water pipe there. So I do get a little passionate about the need for these kinds of revenues and surcharges so that the town can really maintain itself. Not only the general plan, good quality work, but with the technology surcharge so that the town's lack of adequate technology is not being a burden to the customers. Here are a lot of cases where builders, developers of the community will say, you know, your technology is 10 years old, I'm way ahead of you, and you are now impeding my progress. So those are two surcharges that we identified. Again, it's a bit of my input into your funding sources, if you will. I generally recommend these, and I do find them to be very valuable when they're initially installed. A couple of notes on building fees. We added several flat fees. We took we identified several non-habitable type construction projects, turned them into flat fees. There's actually two types of fees within the building fee schedule. One are the flat fees, and then obviously the valuation-based fees. According to our analysis, those valuation-based fees need to go up by 10.4% so that the town can fully recover its cost. And we also did a comparison. Our benchmark cities, as you can see there, are Los Altos Hills, Woodside, Belmont, Hillsborough, and Belvedere. And we did this, instead of looking at the comparisons on a fee-by-fee basis, we did it more on a project-by-project basis. The reason for that is because comparing one fee item with this town, with say with Belvedere or Hillsborough, very, very challenging, almost impossible. Fee descriptions are change a lot, service descriptions change. So we do it on a project basis. So here you have 8,000 square foot home with 4,000 square foot basement, total 12,000 square feet. We did the analysis, and the dark blue there is the current fee that would be charged. The dark red is the fee at full cost, and the purple or violet over here on the far right, that's an average of each of the communities. So for that type of home, that size of home, as you can see, the fee would be slightly less than average. For 800 square foot detached garage, again, your fees, both current as well as any new fees, again, are still less than average. 1,500 square foot pool house, again, you're either at or less than average. 1,000 square foot pool, you're right at or below average. I also did the same thing for planning fees. There's conditional use permits, so there's the average. Actual cost would be obviously higher than average, but still less than the highest. Same thing for variance, higher than average, but still less than two of your benchmark cities. Lot line adjustment, again, you're a little bit higher than average. And then a plan review fence is lower than average. Also did the same kind of comparison for engineering fees. Again, I think you see similar trends. You're either at or below average. You're below average there, you're below average there. Your current fee for a connection to storm drain is higher. The new fee would be lower than average. On balance, my observation is that your fees are well within a reasonable normal range when in comparison to your other benchmark cities.
Can I ask a quick question? So is Belmont, Belmont looks like an outlier to me. Is that skewing the average?
Well, I think Belmont looks like they're the high.
They're like the high.
They're the
Almost
yeah,
everything.
almost everything,
Yeah.
except Hillsborough there, but planning. But I mean, so you didn't throw out the extra high or the extra low and
No.
get an average. I mean, it would just seem like, because Belmont was so high, much higher than everything else, it would skew the average.
Most of these kinds of studies, there's always one that's really high.
Really?
Yeah, pretty common.
Wow.
The one of the jurisdictions I'm working with right now, they've got one that's like, they make everybody look really good because
I
they're so
mean,
high.
their plan review fee for fences? I mean, I don't know.
One thing I caution
What they do with
everybody,
your fences?
one thing I caution everybody to keep in mind with these comparisons is that what you're comparing right there, which is your actual cost, which is versus all of these other bars, if you will, is that you're comparing your cost with someone else's price.
Right.
It is not unusual, I find, to see jurisdictions to not update their fee schedules.
Yeah, you said that.
Really long time. Very, again, the community across the bay, the last update was 20 years ago, and even that was not a detailed study, it was just a general update. I've seen them where the last update was 17 years ago, and that was by someone going out and taking an average of 5 different cities, and that was the fee.
Well, if you were to come back in August, would it be possible for you to put the last update of their fee schedules in there?
Yeah.
And then perhaps have I don't know anybody that's got a 12,000 square foot house. But I'm
Where?
sure there are some here in Atherton, I've seen them, but I don't know the people. So maybe we should have a more modest house, to have that as a reasonable comparison as well.
I think there are more 12,000 square foot houses.
No, I'm sure there's lots, but I think we should probably look, okay?
Okay.
But I think it would be worthwhile, based on your comment in the report, and just reiterated here, it is possible that Belmont just updated theirs and no one else did. And so if we could just get the dates of when they did it, that would be terrific. And it would give us a better perspective.
Yeah, well, maybe, just
You were able
to discuss it. Okay, all right, sorry to interrupt you.
That's all right. No, I appreciate the
Just
question.
looking at the Belmont, it's just crazy.
Some observations, these are my observations at looking at the data, talking to staff, getting a sense of the primarily development operations. Much of the current under-recovery cost is due to the lack of an indirect cost allocation plan. So in updating the cost, we are finding where costs are not, fees are not recovering costs, mostly because of the lack of quality indirect cost allocation plan. Development-related costs are aligned with the benchmark communities as we just discussed. And again, it's just an observation. I didn't do, it was very much outside the scope of the project to look at past costs versus future costs. So my sense is that your move to a contracting environment has probably reduced your costs.
That was the goal.
Again, I can't give you
Right?
any numbers.
That was the goal.
That was the goal.
Yes, but and some of our outsourcing
That was the
was
goal.
revenue share, I guess.
Right.
And so that would be an analysis, because as we add the cost, the fee up, then of course our take is just 42%.
Right. Again, like I say, I can't give you any numbers, but my sense is that probably, that's
Okay.
savings of money. Recommendations, and again, these are fairly boilerplate for me. There was nothing in the study that sort of reached out to me and said they really need to be looking at some magic thing. My standard recommendation is council should set cost recovery targets unless staff set the individual fee levels to match the target. Second, adopt the technology general plan update surcharge again for that those revenue sources so that you can maintain and upgrade quality permitting systems, as well as have funds available for regular routine general plan updates. Update the user fees by some kind of labor CPI at least annually, and then a full cost review like we've done every 3 months. That's my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any member of council have any comments about this at this point? Any questions?
Oh, yeah, I have
You
a
do,
couple.
yes. Go ahead.
So first off, I like what you've done, and there's a lot more it's all-inclusive than the previous one that we did. And, because there they looked more just at direct costs, and that was one of the big shortcomings. In the report that you have, I guess in both your report as well as the staff report, which was duplicative, the information about the staff recommendations, did you make the staff recommendations? Did we have it as a group that made it? Because it was in both. It was in the deliverable report as well as.
It was a group, and we gave them what our recommendations. where he created the cost. He calculated what it would cost us to do each fee, and staff met and looked at, based off of the cost, direct cost to do that, what the fee would be. And that comes back to the setting the cost recovery. Our cost and our fee was below our cost recovery, and some, there was adjustments to be below cost recovery.
Okay, all right. And as you know, we just approved the budget, and it does have some increases, and so if we were to come back and, I would assume we could update those. It's a spreadsheet update. We can then adjust some of the overhead costs. I would expect that we could do that if we were looking at this again in August.
I don't think this was in the budget.
No, fee increases were
Fee
not
increases.
included in
Salary
the budget.
increases were low.
Fee
Well-
increases were not.
You know, the way he built the case, if I remember from your report, and you just reiterated up here, you looked at the salaries in the budget, and because you even have in the back of your report the salaries that you used,
Right.
and they don't match what's in our budget.
Right.
So he did use those.
Yeah. What I generally recommend, and you know, do a lot of work with it if you want, but it's right there. If you know that your salary's increased by 2%, raise the fees by 2%.
Right, and you were just saying the salary increase, because
Yeah.
you did mention CPI. Later on, you talk about labor, but CPI, as you know, is a wide range of different indices, and most of them don't apply.
Right. I'm using the acronym very loosely.
Okay. And then I don't know if you really had much time to really consider the fact of the sharing relationship in our building department. Because I looked at how you put this together. This is just a general question. But if you would come back in August, if you could give some thought to the fact that we have a revenue sharing, and I understand what you did, and that was probably the quick thing to do, and the most concrete thing you had to manage. But because it was a sharing relationship, there might be a different algorithm we could look at. You know, I played around with one this afternoon, but I don't want to tell you how to do your job.
Well, one of the impacts of this kind of a study, especially when we find out that there is opportunities to raise fees, is, and Mike and Brent and Robert and I, we've talked about it to some degree, is that would, if you decided to bring all those fees up to full cost, it would in fact change the nature of the relationship. You would in fact be, I'm sure Mike wouldn't mind this. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. You know, probably wouldn't mind a nice bump in their revenue, but that wouldn't necessarily get that cost coming back to the town.
Right.
So it will change the nature of the relationship, and Robert, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that discussion has already taken place.
Okay.
So that,
So if we could maybe have that in the August discussion. And then the rest of my comments were individual items, and so we're going to have a review here in August, and I'll bring those up at that time. Now I don't have to prepare for that meeting.
Terrific. Nice job. Thank you.
I didn't
Okay.
read his time. I
Yes,
spent
well,
an hour and a half
did.
on it.
So I just feel that it needs more discussion. So I'd like to open it up for public comments. I know that there are several members of the public who'd like to speak on this, unless we want to wait until the study session. Nick, go ahead.
I just said, when you said that revenues wouldn't go back to the town, what were you referring to? Where would they go?
well, right now, for building, there's a revenue sharing relationship with Interwest. And so if the town was to raise the fees up to a little full cost,
Oh, their share of it.
full cost at all, you know, half of that increase would go to Interwest. And so that, I said, when I say, that would impact the nature of that relationship.
But the other half would go into the general funds.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Carol Flaherty, 10 Camino por los Cerros. I'm sorry I've had laryngitis. I may have to kind of croak through this a little bit. And honestly, I hope you give me maybe 2 more minutes, because I've waited 4 years. 4 years. See these folders? That's 4 years of coming to these council meetings. That's 13 cities in here. By the way, you missed Menlo Park and Redwood City, and you should take a look, because our permit fees would have been $6,000 less in Menlo Park on our current Atherton Avenue project had I used their rates. So I think we need a few more cities on the chart. I brought you something tonight, because I don't think you guys understand what's going on. Nor would I, if I were in your place. You have to actually build to understand the building fees and understand this study. It doesn't matter what you do with the cost in that study. That's not where the money is. Not in the demo permit and the, demolition permit. They're trivial. There are only two numbers that matter. It's the $300 that has to be $350 for the habitable and the $200 for the uninhabitable. And if you understand that, the rest of that doesn't matter. They did a fine job. No problem with the labor cost. I read the whole report. It was given to me last week. But you have a bigger problem than that, because the law says that the fees have to be fair and reasonable. So I want to show you fair and reasonable, if you'll indulge me. 5 packages for you, with a bunch of stuff. So, because,
Carol,
again, I don't
do you have any
think-
more of those? Because we have a legal requirement they're provided to the city council at the meeting. At the end of the meeting, we have to give them to anybody else in the audience that wants.
I don't. But since we're doing a study, maybe you can just hold up some pictures, so everybody can see what's going on, because there's a real big problem with the study, and it's the number of hours. And it was the problem with the MBS study. So one thing about the MBS study, again, please indulge me a few more minutes, they actually had some pretty good comparison tables for cities between Hillsborough, San Carlos, San Bruno, blah, blah, blah. And those comparison tables said that on that habitable, uninhabitable, the cost ranged from $35, $37 on the uninhabitable to $70, and it ranged from $185 to $250 on the habitable. You know what? Those numbers were right. They were actually right. So in December of 2011, we filed for a permit for our latest project on Atherton Avenue, which we have finished this week. And I thought about bringing you my box tonight of all of my bills, because I have 27 pages of font size 8 detail on the cost. I'm happy to give to you. I know every penny down to every stamp that went into that project. So we filed for our permit, surprise, surprise. You got the permit there. It was valued at the project $4,125,550. Came in at less than $2 million, real. We filed a protest. We hired Walt McNeil. Spent 4 hours with Bill. Bill said, oh, let's just be cooperative about this. The council is going to get this study going. We'll have it within 4 months or so. Let's just do a tolling agreement and forget this litigation. I was happy, because I don't really want to sue the town. I've been arrested since '85. And thought, okay, we'll have a study within 4 or so months. 16 months later, we have the study, but we have a tolling agreement in place. So, the problems with the study. I told you about the hours. That's a huge problem. I've told you the $300, which is where the money is on the building stuff, is a problem. The $350. I've told you the $200 is a problem. So how big a problem? I'm going to tell you our last 3 projects. And then I'm going to tell you what I did about it. And I'm going to tell you about the conversation I had with 2 other builders. So I took our last projects, this is the last page of the first 3 that are my comments. Atherton Avenue, our actual cost per habitable square foot, $185, pretty far cry from $350. Non-inhabited, $73, really a far cry from $200. Okay, but that's too low, because I'm not paying myself a contractor's fee. And I have pretty good discounts, and I have my own employees. So I said, you know what, I'm so good, I'm just going to give the town $1 million. I'm going to add $1 million to my real cost, because that's going to take care of any building project by anybody. PPG, Jeff Weiss, Lencioni, anybody, to add that $1 million. When I did that, I came up with a cost for the habitable of $277 a square foot, still pretty far below $350, and the non-inhabited of $109, about half of the $200. Then I went back and I looked at our last project, Adam Way. As the houses get bigger, the cost per square foot gets smaller. Cost per square foot on that house, because it was quite large, almost 13,000 square feet, $159 on the habitable. On the uninhabitable, $62.21. I add my $1 million to it, I would get a cost on the habitable of $237 per square foot. I went to the one before that, 2 Sutherland, did not have a basement. That got higher because the square footage lower, $201 a square foot on the habitable. So you see, the problem is this little thing called fair and reasonable. And it's not fair and reasonable to have a valuation on a building project that is $2 million higher than the actual cost. Now, earlier tonight I heard, well, all we have to have is a reasonable cost study. Wrong. You have to have some semblance to reality. So I actually think you should keep the $350 a square foot on the habitable. And I'm happy to go ahead and pay it. It's the $200 that's the problem. And it's not about the builders, because there have been 136 permits already rendered this year for accessory structures. It's the pool house. It's the wine cellar that's being built outside. And it's not the builders, it's your neighbors that are paying this outrageous amount 2 times more. I'm going to make one last comment. That technology fee, you should be shocked if you put that in. Because we're paying right now on these fees 40% more on the habitable than it really is. We're paying 285% more on the uninhabitable. And you know what's going to happen on the taxes when we sell Atherton Avenue? We're going to get a tax bill in January of $90,000 more than we're paying right now. Now, if it's still true that you get 17%, that 17% that my taxes are going to bring in is 1/3 of the cost of all that technology upgrade for the year. At some point, maybe taxes should pay for something, and tax increases. It's the new homes that are bringing the money in. So I hope when you delay this to August, that you'll not just look at the study, because that's a numbers manipulation, that's math. I can get any cost recovery that you all want by changing the hours and by changing the manipulatives. But there's no way to take that study and ever get to $350 or get to $200 and get to the real world. And you do have to have a balance of both. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you for giving us this information. So I'm going to bring it back to council, and I thought we had public comments already. Oh, excuse me, sure. Yeah, I did, I opened it up, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for having me. My name is Frank Lewis. I am the owner of NorCal Construction. I do the majority of our work as custom single residential homes. I've been building in the area with other high-end contractors and on my own since 2000, on my own, but since 1996. And I remember I'm soaking all this up, and I'm just here to have my comments and what the new staff has provided and whatnot. But I remember when fees, to me it doesn't matter what the price per square foot the fees are based on, because I remember back in the day when we were building for $400 or $500 a square foot, and the fees were based on $200 a foot. And so recently I too have gone working in 13,000 square foot homes. It's the norm. If you look at the permits that are pulled, you know, the permits that are being pulled, that is the size of the houses here in Atherton. You know, the majority of them. So our fees at building are higher. They're not at $350, but they're close. If people come and take a look, they'd see that where the money was spent. I too questioned the fees when we pulled some permits. Not only do I build for homeowners, I'm also an investor in some of these houses, so it's also money out of my pocket. And being in the area and building for the last, since '96, seen several different staff. And I have to say, and I commend them every day, who you have here, on all accounts, has been the best I've seen. And people are interested out there as clients, and you have to, this is my perspective, what I've heard. I push for Atherton as much as possible when clients want to buy. They're either Bertola Valley or Woodside or Atherton, and people talk. It's a nightmare to build elsewhere because of the time it takes and the money. People will pay for good service. It's the bottom line. And what the current staff has done here is they've provided that better than any other municipality around. hands down. If everybody took a lesson from what they provided, it would be great for everyone. And so with that being said, no matter what the cost is, I would push it as a homeowner's perspective, as a representative. I push it on for myself to pay. Time is money, and the amount of time that they've saved for the fees are fees, whether it's based on a square footage price or whatever. You have to look at the service provided and what you're getting. And to me, it doesn't matter. I would pay more because the savings that we have seen in the time saved is tremendous. And they understand, and you know, I can't say enough. Whatever the cost is, you should pay it because we're providing the service. And when we build a house, I just have one more point, I know it's going to get cut off, is
Go ahead, you can finish.
we've taken, built a new house, no other environmental impact as far as density of population or whatnot, $4,000 a year tax bill, property taxes, brought it up to $125,000 to $150,000. That's the gift that keeps on giving. We've, you know, tens and tens of thousands of dollars that we put into the schools. $4 million a year on a project stimulating the local economy with the workers and everybody. And so that's something that hasn't impacted any other thing other than future growth. And the people out there are more willing to do it because the service that is provided makes it easier and whatnot. So being out there in that sense, I wanted to, you know, let you know from our perspective that we appreciate it. And I want to be able to build 100% in Atherton because it's just, these guys are phenomenal,
You
so.
can sell the house after you build it,
Yes,
and you can
yes,
make a little profit.
absolutely. And we want to do it again and want to keep doing it. So I'd like to have 100% of our business here. That's how I feel about it, so, thank
for
you.
your comments. Any other member of the public like to speak on this master fee schedule? You want a folder? Oh,
My pointers work.
I haven't looked at this in detail, but I think I will volunteer the finance committee to look at this in more depth if there's time to do that. I just don't know whether you're supposed to vote on it tonight or not.
So Greg, we're going to hold a council study session in August at our next day. We have our July study session, July 3rd already booked, but August 3rd, we're going to take a look at it and delve in deeper.
August 7th.
Sorry, August 7th. I knew it was
August 7th?
Yeah, study
Is the
session.
finance committee invited?
Of course.